Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm very happy and honoured to be able to rise today on behalf of my constituents from Portage-Lisgar and speak in favour of the Opposition Day motion. The motion that does a couple of things, but primarily two things would be accomplished if this motion were passed. One, it would recognise the good work being done by Canada's Office of Religious Freedoms, and I think that that is something we probably all could agree on in this House. That seems to be a consensus that the Office of Religious Freedom has done good work, and Dr. Bennett and the folks that he has worked with have done good work. It's the second part that seems to be the contentious part of the motion, and that is where we are calling on the government to renew the current mandate of the office. The reason for that is because the continuation of its vital work is needed now more than ever. So I want to speak on both of those topics, Madam Speaker, and talk a little bit about my experience since being a Member of Parliament and prior to being a Member of Parliament in terms of what I learned about how blessed we are to live in Canada and to have religious freedoms, and to many times take those religious freedoms for granted. And then, as a Member of Parliament, to have learned from other colleagues in other countries about the lack of religious freedom, and not just emotional or social persecution, but physical persecution right to the point of death that other individuals in other countries have had to suffer. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important, first of all, to note that the issue of religious freedoms around the world is a growing concern. Religious freedoms around the world are not expanding. If anything, religious freedoms around the world are contracting. That means that people who are living in Muslim countries are not freer to practice their Christian faith. That means that people who are living in communist countries are not freer to practice their Sikh faith or their Muslim faith or their Jewish faith. That means, Mr. Speaker, in fact, and these are not my statistics, but this is according to Global Affairs Canada, that nearly 77% of the world's population lives in countries with high government restrictions on freedom of religion and or social hostilities which are allowed by the government, committed by individuals and groups involving religion. 77% of all the world's population is living with restrictions on their religious freedoms. In terms of the Christian population in the world, according to the Voice of the Martyrs, 85% of the world's population is subject to persecution if they are Christians or seek conversion to Christianity. So not only are they not allowed to practice their religion, if they are of another religion and want to convert to Christianity or to a different religion, they are restricted from doing that. Mr. Speaker, this is a problem, again, that is growing not just for Christians. It's an issue for all the major religions of the world, including Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, and, has already been mentioned, those who profess no faith. There are people in our world who have no faith. They are atheists. But in the particular country that they live in, they are not allowed to publicly profess that, or they will face death, prosecution, penalty for having that particular non-belief. It is a problem, and it is a problem that should be recognized and should be called out as an issue. The Office of Religious Freedoms is an office that our government created. It was actually an election promise. So when we were elected in 2011, I think we can say with confidence that we were given the mandate to create this Office of Religious Freedoms. It was not opposed by any of the parties when we created it. It was agreed on that it was something that was needed. It was given a modest budget, but even with that modest budget, it was able to accomplish a lot of good work. It was created, amongst things, to defend religious communities abroad, to advocate, to analyze, and to develop policy and programs to protect religious communities under threat. And it's been doing that work. Even with a small budget of $5 million, it's been able to do work in Bangladesh to educate school-aged children. And so many times that is where religious intolerance starts. At a very, very young age, wrong teachings are given to children. So in Bangladesh, it's been able to educate children. It's increased awareness around the world about the Holocaust, something that we're seeing anti-Semitism grow. So to see awareness of the Holocaust and capacity building seminars on the Holocaust and remembrance being taught is so important. Engagement's been done by the office in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria. This is engagement with youth, with religious leaders, with relevant authorities and community members in Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria to increase interreligious dialogue for the promotion of religious freedoms and tolerance. And Madam Speaker, I could go on and talk about all of the good things that the Office of Religious Freedoms has done, but as I said, I think that we are in agreement. And so it seems that the case that the opposition has to try to make to the government is that we do need to single out the issue of religious rights when it comes to making a strong defense. And I would readily admit that as Conservatives, we do tend to call out issues pretty specifically and then try to address them. When we were in government, we did that on our maternal and newborn health initiative. We recognized that around the world, women in other countries had no value. There were women that were given no resources, women who were dying when they were given birth to children. And children had no value in some countries around the world. And so we directed our international aid dollars to specifically help women who were suffering from when they were in childbirth and young children. Yes, we were very specific. Yes, we called it out. We didn't just say, well, let's just protect all humanity and throw money at helping all humanity. We were very specific, and we said, let's as Canadians and as a Canadian government, help women. We also did it when we called out strongly our support of Israel and spoke of our support for Israel. We tend to, as Conservatives, and sometimes we are criticized for it, but I know I won't change my mind on it. We call out offenses as we see them, and creating the Office of Religious Freedoms was one of these areas where we didn't want to lump it together with women's rights or with LGBT rights or with other infractions on human rights. For some reason, religious rights always goes to the bottom of the list when talking about human rights. So yes, as Conservatives, we wanted and we created the Office of Religious Freedoms. My daughter, who is now 21 years old, when she was in grade 3, I remember her coming home, and my daughter was fairly popular. She was a very pleasant little girl, and she did well in school, and she had lots of friends, and she was quite enjoying her grade 3 class and all of her friends. But she came home in tears a number of days, and she said, Mommy, there's a little boy who's being bullied, and they're mean to him. But I'm scared to say anything, because if I say anything, then they will be mean to me, and they won't like me, and I probably won't be as popular. And that's a pretty common concern for children, isn't it? When they're seeing somebody else being bullied, they, as children, don't want the target to go on them. They want to continue to be asked to the parties, be part of the cool group, be in all the pictures, be invited to all the great parties. But sometimes, Madam Speaker, when you stand up to the bully, you're not popular. Sometimes you have to make a stand, and in making that stand, you lose a little bit of popularity. Dare I say, maybe that's what happens. Some say Canada is back under the Liberals. I would say maybe Canada will be more popular when it comes to being invited to the parties, maybe being invited to a seat at the UN, because now maybe Canada won't be offending some of the biggest religious rights violators, which are sitting at the table at the UN. But I would dare say that Canada will be standing up for the rights of those who are bullied, the rights of individuals like Shahbaz Bhatti, who gave his very life. He was assassinated for standing up to the bully. So I would ask that the government would reconsider, would with pride stand up for women, stand up for minorities, and stand up for religious freedoms by continuing the good work of the Office of Religious Freedoms. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for St. Catharines?
Almost.
Oh, almost.
This is Pierrepont.
Pembroke de l'Or, c'est ça?
Oui.
Pembroke de l'Or. Oh, Pierrefort. C'est Pierrefort. Il est à la bonne place. Oui. Oh, Pierre-Fond Delors, excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, religious freedoms are a subset of human rights, and they're an important subset of human rights. And no one on this side of the government would argue that. In fact, we're very much in favor of promoting and supporting human rights. The issue is, as was brought up by the member there, it's a very narrow definition. One point you had brought up, what that was brought up, I should say, was the question of atheists. These are people who have decided that they are not religious, and they do not ascribe to any religion. So unfortunately, the Office of Religious Freedom would not protect them because they are not ascribing to any religion. And it would be a concern of mine to say if someone has decided not to be part of one religion, they shouldn't be protected by human rights. So my question would be, are you not concerned that we should not be protecting atheists as well? And if we are to protect atheists who are not religious, would we not want to look to expand the question of religious freedoms?
I just want to remind the member that he's to address the question to the Speaker and not to individual members. The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Lisgar. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank my colleague for that question, and it's actually one I'm very happy to answer. The Office of Religious Freedoms absolutely protects and promotes the protection of all religions or no religions around the world. So certainly, and we would agree 100% that Canada and any of the funds that the Canadian funds that would go towards the Office of Religious Freedoms would also protect those individuals around the world who are atheists and would have no religion. I absolutely would agree with my colleague on that, and that is the work that this office has done and would continue to do. So we are absolutely on the same side on that.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Edmonton, Manning.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I congratulate my colleague for a great speech today. The question is, we've been hearing from the members opposite on the government side that they want to protect freedom of religions, they want to be on top of things and all that kind of stuff. But it seems like this is a double standard. You want to protect and you want to continue working on religious freedom. In the meantime, you go and you shut down the Office of Religious Freedom. This is a double standard, and seems like this is the liberal way of doing things. I'm not sure if my colleague will agree with me on that.
The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Well, I thank my colleague for the question. I think the problem that we're having on this side is trying to understand exactly what the government is, what their position is on this. I think for them to say, well, we're just protecting all human rights, so we don't actually need to call out religious rights separately. It just doesn't. It sounds a little hollow. There's something that just doesn't quite ring true with that. I think that this is a government who in promoting women's rights. He very proudly calls himself a feminist. He is talking abroad about the rights of women. Not afraid. This is a party, the Liberals are a party that are very proud to stand up about specific minority rights. And yet, for some reason, they are shying away from stating emphatically that we need to promote religious freedom. So, truthfully, I don't have an answer to my colleagues' questions. We are trying to find out what is it that they are afraid of. Who are they afraid of offending? Are they afraid that we are somehow promoting Western civilization? I've heard that criticism. I do wish the government would articulate exactly why they are afraid of singling out religious freedoms.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I do want to ask this member, thank you, first of all, for an excellent speech. I want to ask this member about this issue of the indivisibility of rights. Because I think all of us agree that rights are, in some sense, indivisible. But, of course, we have things like the Status of Women Department, like the Minister for the Status of Women, which singles out a specific area of rights. Of course, we recognize the interconnections of all rights. But doesn't it make sense to have centers of excellence that are focusing on specific areas of rights, recognizing the interconnectedness, but also bringing a specific focus and helping to ensure that that aspect of rights is also part of the wider picture?
Very brief answer from the member for Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you. I just returned from a conference, an international conference of parliamentarians in Berlin on combating anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. People of Jewish faith are afraid to even wear their kippah to show their faith because of persecution and violence. We have to call it out, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's anti-Christianity, anti-Muslim, anti-religion, and negating religious freedoms has to be called out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We're going to